I read about 25 to 30 books a year, and I also revisit books fairly often. Here I'm going to share my system with you. Everything from how I find the motivation to read books, how I select books, how I read, and how I retain the knowledge gained from the books. Caveat, I'm mostly going to refer to nonfiction books here. Personally, I think novels are great. I don't read as many novels as I like to, but I read enough of them for pleasure. Some of the strategies I'm sharing here are not as relevant for novels, but to each their own. I also want to emphasize something that's a big part of my reading philosophy. Knowledge retention is absolutely key. If you're reading books without assistance and you've forgotten something, I think you're missing out. But more on this later. Another heads up. I'm going to show you how to read books in non-traditional ways in case you're busy or just cannot be bothered to hold a book in your hands. It's the year 2025. There are so many great ways to absorb information from books, so do not let that be an obstacle. All right, let's go. First of all, we always start with why. Why read books? Aren't books ancient? Most of us got burned out of reading books after college or university. It's understandable. The biggest reason I can give for reading books is that it's the most direct way to access knowledge from some of the most brilliant people on the planet, either alive or dead. Before podcasts, before YouTube, there were books. Think of books as the most direct way to have a quality conversation with a politician, business leader, historian, celebrity, or whomever. Unless you're one of the most well-connected, famous people on the planet, it's difficult to access knowledge from the best minds in the world. Books are a shortcut to people's minds. Not to mention, if your favorite author is dead, you will not need to invent a time machine to learn from them. The second biggest reason for reading books, it teaches you how to focus. I'm guilty of being on my phone 500 times a day, and most of us are bombarded with distractions. Books are a way for us to calm down, slow down, and be in true focus mode. It's like touching grass, but with your brain. And now, a rant against podcasts. I strongly believe that if books are knowledge and intellectual nutrition, then podcasts are fast food. Usually, you listen to a podcast and then you forget about it 5 minutes later. I mean, whatever happened to being alone with your thoughts? There's this tendency to fill up silence with music or podcasts or distractions. Look, I get it. There's a time and place for entertainment. Podcasts serve that purpose. But I'm also making the argument that if you want something to listen to, audiobooks can step in. Books have a focused theme. They generally go through an editorial process, are edited and written with readability and structure in mind. You get a sense for the author's voice and how they communicate their ideas. But the trade-off is that it's not as easy to digest as fast food. So that's the motivation and why part. The next part is book selection. This is probably one of the most important set of skills you can develop, which is number one, how do I select which books to read? Number two, how do I read the books? And number three, how do I deal with books that are just not very interesting? I admit this is pretty subjective. There's no science to it, but I'm going to share my methodology with you that I've developed through a decade of trial and error. First of all, book selection. I generally keep a document of books I want to read. Anytime I come across an article, video, talk to a friend, or whatever, I just add the book to the queue. And it's true, the list can get really long and really big. So I've started to prioritize all of this based on friends' recommendations first. Not what Amazon or Kindle or what a stranger on the internet recommends to me, but I will actually message my friends who are readers and ask them, what did you read in the last 6 months that's super interesting? And whatever they recommend, I'll put that on the top of my list. It's good to do it this way because after I'm done reading, I'll have someone to discuss it with. And it also lets me ask them follow-up questions like, why did you find the book interesting? And is it just me? Or did this chapter just not make a lot of sense? I like that interaction. It's important to note here that book clubs serve a similar purpose. A group of people decide to read a certain book together, discuss the book chapter by chapter. But personally, I'm not a fan of this because it puts too many restrictions and deadlines on reading. If I'm busy with life and I don't make progress on my book, I feel guilty. On the other hand, if I'm loving the book I'm on, I might read it too fast and now I have to slow down to accommodate the group discussion. So Generally speaking, if you're motivated enough and you find the right books, you will not need a book club. Trust me. Yes, if you like the social aspect of book clubs, by all means, find and join one. But I'm just one of those super introverted people who would rather read a book than talk to someone. Call me crazy. The next thing I'm going to share is the art of previewing books. What I do is I often try to preview books before committing to buying and reading them. I will search YouTube or Bilibili for a book explainer, summary video to get a basic idea of what the book is about. I might even listen to a podcast with the author who is promoting the book. Now with AI, I use DeepSeek and ChatGPT to ask it to summarize a certain book. I'm not saying that previewing replaces the book reading process, but I basically want to test myself. If, after checking out the previews, I'm still interested in reading the book, then that's a good sign. Otherwise, I might just get the key points out of the summary and skip the book, which is also fine. It really depends on your style. I know some people never end up reading the books, they just watch the summaries, and I think that's perfectly fine. After all, you're getting the knowledge out of the book anyways, and that's the goal. Now, the fun part. After I've decided which books to read, how do I actually read them? Again, this is a highly personal and subjective domain, but I'll just share what I do, and you can decide if it makes sense for you. I try to read multiple books at once, usually 1 to 2, although sometimes it gets up to 3 or 4 books. I try to have a primary book. If I'm enjoying it, I read that one above the other ones. And I try to set a time target daily for reading. For me, it's usually 30 minutes. I put away my phone, turn off notifications, set a 30-minute timer, and just start reading. I don't stress about how many pages I've read or how fast I'm reading. I just time box the activity. And if I'm really into it on a particular day, I might read more than 30 minutes, but I always try to have a minimum of 30. I'm a strong believer that you should work on the most important things in your life earlier in the day. If it's an important piece of work, a big workout, or an appointment, do those things early in the morning. The reading can wait until you're on a lunch break or at the end of the night when you've done all the other things. Remember that reading should be pleasurable. You need to be present to absorb the information, but it's usually not the most important thing in your life. Personally, I like to read right before bedtime because it also forces me to put my phone away, ideally in another room. Okay, let's talk about knowledge retention from books. When I read, I try to keep a journal. This can be a physical book to write in or a digital document, but I try to take notes after reading the book after every couple of days to summarize the main points, especially if it's a business book, because I find those types of books to be the most practical in terms of I'm telling you something and you need to apply it to your life. Our memories are so fragile and we simply forget things we've read. That's why over the years, I've really enjoyed going back to the book summaries instead of the books themselves. One of the most important utilities of books is applying the knowledge to your own life. So let's say I find a business book about setting goals. I'll review my notes and then write down how I can set career and life goals based on the suggestions from the book. And I might journal about that and revisit it in 6 months, in 12 months, or even longer. As for book rotations, why do I have more than one book that I'm actively reading? Because sometimes books are dull and you're blocked on one of them. When I'm not feeling like reading a certain book, but I want to achieve my daily reading habit, I'll move on to my second or my third book. And after I read that other book, I might try switching back to the primary book. Sometimes after taking a break, I'm interested in it once again. And here's why I need to share one of the most important techniques for reading ever. You need to know how to quit books. Let me say that again. You need to know when to quit. The reason why reading can be a chore is that a lot of books, business books especially, are known for having one major point and then stretching it, regurgitating it over 10 or more agonizing chapters. If you feel like you've gotten all there is to get from a book, or you simply aren't feeling it, it's totally okay to abandon the book, mark it as abandoned, and then stop reading it. Move on to the third or the fourth book in your rotation. Look, life is too short to be stuck reading a book you don't want to read. This is the most important piece of advice I can give. If there's anything you're getting out of this video, please let this be it. I've also had crazy experiences where I'll put a book down for years, and then years later, when I go back to it, I'm suddenly a big fan of the book. Books are highly contextual based on where you are in your life and what's on your mind. So don't ever feel guilty about sunk costs or abandoning a book that just isn't doing it for you. Just put it back on the bookshelf. Now, what about digital formats? Audiobooks and books on Kindle or Apple Books. Personally, I'm a fan of all the formats. I have books on paper, and I might listen to it on audiobook if I'm on the go, and then switch back to the paper copy at night. I have no issue with Kindle and Apple Books. I buy half of my books digitally if it's hard to find where I am, which is in China. I never restrict myself to one format. Digital books also have the advantage of being easy to highlight and take notes directly in the digital app without having to physically underline and highlight the book. So I think there are a lot of advantages with digital. I mean, come on, it's 2025. You don't need to read books made from dead trees if you don't want to. Shout out to my friend Connor, who still lives in the Stone Ages, but I digress. It's all about personal choice. And that's pretty much it. That's my reading system. If you're on the fence about getting back into reading books, hopefully there's some interesting food for thought here. Remember, books are nutrition. Books are awesome, but pick good books and be prepared to give up on the ones that you don't connect with. Happy reading.